Good morning, my precious members and friends of the Ray of Hope Christian Church. What a joy it is to greet you this beautiful morning. I hope you are well and happy. I want to welcome you to this morning's program entitled Mental Health Conversations, highlighting the pandemic. With all that we've been through over the last 15 months, the drama and the trauma, we need to have this conversation. And I am so excited to have joining us our distinguished panelists, Dr. Asha Dickerson, Reverend Dr. Emmanuel Larti, and Reverend J. Lynn Peabody Smith. I'm also grateful for the Reverend Erica Geralds, who will be moderating our panel, and the Reverend Kenny Rice, our staff lead. Providing technical support is Reverend Jabari Butler and Karen Graham. As I said, with all that we have been through, we very much need to hear from our experts this morning, helping us to navigate through the pain and even the uncertainty that is before us. I'm grateful to the Keys of Hope Ministry, Reverend Donna Gunter and Darlene Taylor, for their vision, sensitivity, and passion to meet the needs of people. God bless you. Enjoy this time.
Good morning. I am Reverend Donna Gunter, and I am so delighted to welcome each and every one of you this morning to our mental health conversation highlighting the pandemic. Thank you, Pastor, for that wonderful greeting and for your awesome leadership. And so many of you know that this is May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we're delighted to take time to have this conversation in light of, as Pastor said, all that has been going on. And so we're grateful for each and every one of you that have joined us at this time. We know that we have people that are joining us from Georgia, people that have joined from North Carolina, people that have joined from out west. And so we greet you this morning and thank you for getting up early to be with us. We have people that are from our church, people that are from other churches, people that are from the mental health arena. And so we thank you and we honor the time that you have taken to be with us on this morning. And so if you are joining us right now or you've already joined, we ask that you would send a greeting to all your other co-viewers and in the comment section and let us know where you're joining in from. God bless you. So will you join me in a word of prayer at this time? Most loving, caring, and magnificent God, we honor your name on this morning. We set ourselves before you and those whom you have ordained at this specific moment to bring healing and wholeness to our minds, our souls, and our spirits. It is in your word that we are to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And we know that oftentimes we have not taken the time or paid attention to what is going on in our minds, in our spirits, and in our souls, and to understand that mental health is a serious matter. We ask that you would bless now all individuals and families who have been managing and or experiencing a mental health challenge. It is our prayer that this gathering and that the information that is shared will loose any strongholds and will bring us to the place where we speak freely about what is going on in our minds, in our hearts, and in our souls. God, we ask that you would bless each and every panelist, that you would bless our moderator, that you will continue to bless our pastor, the Reverend Dr. Cynthia L. Hale, and that you will speak life at this very moment. Speak, God, for your people are listening. Speak, God, for your people want to be free. Speak, God, because your people are seeking healing and wholeness. It's in the mighty name of your son, Jesus, that we pray. Amen. And so, without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for this dynamic conversation. the Reverend Erica D. Geralds. Reverend Erica D. Gerald serves as an associate minister at the Ray. She is one of the facilitators of the Keys of Hope Counseling Ministry Grief Support Groups and is a staff counselor at her alma mater, Mercer University. She has a bachelor's degree in organization corporate communication, a Master of Divinity degree in pastoral care and counseling, and a Master of Science degree in clinical mental health counseling. Most of all, Rev Erica is passionate about the calling God has placed on her life to serve in the areas of pastoral care and mental health counseling. It is her goal to combine the healing powers of God and the philosophies of mental health healing and wholeness. And doing this, one of her accomplishments thus far on this journey is she is the founder and owner of Begin Again Counseling, Coaching, and Consultant Services. Good morning, Reverend Erica.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you, Pastor Hill, for your warm welcome, and Reverend Donna Gunter for that wonderful introduction. Again, I'm Reverend Erica D. Geralds, and I'm honored to be the moderator for this dynamic conversation on today. I join Pastor Hill in welcoming all of you that have joined us for our today's conversation, where we'll be highlighting the pandemic. We welcome all of our online listeners, whether you are joining via Facebook Live, the Ray of Hope website, or the Ray of Hope YouTube page. Don't forget to check in. Let us know where you are joining from. If you like, use a hashtag support mental health or hashtag mental health matters. Please feel free throughout the day to make comments. We invite you to like, love, and share the conversation so that others can join in. As we know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and mental health can affect anyone at any time, which is why we are having this very important conversation. And we're so glad that you have joined us. Our purpose today is to break down barriers, stop the stigma, silence the shame, overcome misconceptions about mental health, and to help us build healthier faith communities, individuals, and families. We know that it's been a tough year. And so today, our experts will help guide us through this conversation where we can talk openly about our mental health. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our panelists for today. Our first panelist is Dr. Asia Dickerson. Dr. Asia is a licensed professional counselor, the owner of AD Advantage Counseling and Education Services, LLC. She also serves as an associate professor at Adler Graduate School, and she's the chair of the American Counseling Association of Georgia. Dr. Asia is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Her goal is to educate, encourage, and enrich the lives of individuals. We welcome you, Dr. Asha Dickerson. Our second panelist is the Reverend Dr. Emmanuel Larti. Dr. Larti teaches pastoral theology, care, and counseling at Candler, as well as in the in-person community and religious life program and Emory's Graduate Division of Religion. Dr. Larti has previously taught pastoral and practical theology at the University of Birmingham in the United Kingdom and at Columbia Theological Seminary in Decatur, Georgia. An internationally acclaimed scholar, Dr. Larti recognized as a pioneer in the development of an intercultural approach to pastoral care and counseling. Dr. Larti is an author of In Living Color, an intercultural approach to pastoral care and counseling. We welcome you, Dr. Emmanuel Larti. And our third panelist is Reverend J. Lynn Peabody Smith. She is a licensed professional counselor and also a pastoral counselor. Reverend J. Lynn is the president, CEO of Peabody Practice, LLC. She has served in ministry for over 20 years and currently serves as the executive pastor at Redemptive Life Church, Fellowship in Conyers, Georgia. Reverend J. Lynn is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She recently proudly served as the Southern Regional Chaplain from 2016 to 2020. In January 2020, she founded My Sacred Space, a faith-based nonprofit counseling organization. Reverend J. Lynn is also a published author. Her latest book, Heals, Hearts, and Halos, Lessons on My Journey. We welcome you, Reverend J. Lynn Peabody Smith. Now, we know that no matter how we try to make today's conversation safe, we know that it can also address very serious personal topics and can be triggering for some of our listeners. So we also have with us Asia Dickerson, who is a licensed professional counselor. She's also the owner, operator of Mosaics Counseling in Tucker, Georgia. She's also instrumental in getting the Keys of Hope Counseling Ministry started here at Ray of Hope Christian Church. She will serve today as our counselor support professional. Asia Dickerson.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much to everyone who has gotten this together. As everyone has said, we are in such an interesting time, and it motivates us to be better. And so I hope that you take advantage of this opportunity to utilize not just the panelists, but the resources available to you to get additional support in any area that you need. No question, no concern, no issue is too big, nothing is too small. That is why we are here. We want to assist you, we want to support you. If you have questions, if you have concerns, if you need additional support, please contact, you can text to 470-336-7373. Again, 470-336-7373. You can also send an instant message through Facebook to Messenger at Mosaics Counseling on Facebook. We are happy to be a support and want to encourage you to take care of yourself. Thank you.
So much for that information and support to our listeners. Now let's start the mental health conversation where we're highlighting the pandemic. The format today will be our panelists will each provide brief talks on each area of expertise, followed by a time where you will join in the conversation where we will have questions and answers. We will begin the conversation with panelist Dr. Asha Dickerson, who is going to provide a brief talk on the pandemic's impact on children and families' emotional and mental health. Dr. Dickerson.
Good morning, and thank you all so much for having me here. This is a topic that is very important to me, both professionally and personally, as I have children like many of you do. Of course, we know that children and most adults like to be social. School is something that's important to them. A lot of times they'll listen to their friends and talk to their friends more than they will talk to their parents and other adults in their lives. But this pandemic has brought about a new dynamic where we're having to figure out how to handle our basic needs and also those very social needs that have kind of come without us even thinking about them before. They were just there, where you could be with people if you wanted to be, and then you could kind of escape if you didn't want to be, bothered. So in the beginning of the pandemic, we found out that our needs were shifting. We found out that we used to like to sit close to people, and then we had to give them 6 feet of distance. So we had to cut down on hugs. Whereas you may not have been a hugger before, or your children may not have been huggers before, they started to miss not being able to at least reach out and touch people. We found that we already knew we needed hand soap, And we would always talk to our children about using hand soap before, but now it was a matter of life and death. And although we did not know we needed it, we found out that apparently toilet paper was also a basic need when everyone started going out to the stores buying it up. Because we and our children no longer really had a social life, we found that there was a need for a virtual social life. Church had to be virtual. Our meetings had to be virtual. And then we started just having other virtual gatherings so that we could see people that we just wanted to lay eyes on for their safety, for our safety, and of course, for our mental health. We also need patience, and then we needed access to information. But a lot of problems that came were because of too much access to incorrect information. Our kids would get info from their friends about who could catch coronavirus and who couldn't catch it. Some of us, myself included, were looking at the numbers of positive cases and deaths almost daily. And as you might know now, that can cause a lot of stress, a lot of grief, a lot of pain in some instances. As we sat home more, we found that we didn't necessarily need business clothes as much, but maybe we needed to work out more. We found time for reading. We needed to encourage our children to read more because they would sit at home and watch a lot of TV and play on the internet a lot more. And then some of those things that were already necessary for our children, such as snacks and games, became overly necessary, where you had to say, cut down on eating some of those snacks because number one, we want you to be healthy, and number two, snacks are not free, not for everyone. And last but not least, when we think about our needs, starting with our foundations and then getting to the top, our number one need is compassion for ourselves and definitely for our children. So when thinking about parenting strategies, some of the important things to look at are patience. It's difficult to be patient with ourselves, but it is extremely difficult to be patient with our children when they're in the house every day, all day, burning up the internet when you need to work from home, also running around being loud when you're in meetings. Another thing that you want to keep in mind is taking breaks. People seem to think that the COVID-19 pandemic meant that we were in a productivity competition and they would work from sun up to sundown. Some people would do that in the office, but the research has shown that productivity increased quite a bit because people were working from home and they always had access to their work. Use your resources, especially when it comes to what you need for your children. For me, 5th grade math is not that easy, despite all the degrees that I have. But I have friends who teach in the school system, and they became my resources, whereas I never would have reached out to them before about, can you just go over this with my child? They were prepared and willing to sit at a computer. And these friendships and these resources that we use have to be mutualistic because everyone was being drained. So we have to start looking at, especially from a parenting and family standpoint, how can I give a little and get a little? You have to advocate for your children. Now, those of you who have children who are still going to the regular school systems realize that the teachers may have become a little burned out as well. Some teachers took that and it created empathy, but for a lot of other teachers, they were kind of doing the most. It's your job as a parent to go in and advocate for your children, to remind the teachers that, this is their first time, a lot of them, teaching online, and this is your child's first time doing school online, and we were all adjusting and learning together. When you're thinking about working with your children and having them home with you, it is very important to also be creative. We have to set a schedule, but change our routine a little bit. Maybe have your children help you cook. Maybe come up with a game for how we clean up. We need to make sure that we're communicating, but not just communicating and screaming and just getting all of our words out, but communicating in the most effective ways possible. Part of that communication includes stepping away sometimes. When you feel like you're getting frustrated, and children will frustrate you, and partners and spouses will frustrate you, coworkers will frustrate you, take a break sometimes. Whether that means just stepping outside on your porch for a second, taking a whole walk, or if possible, taking a whole staycation at a friend or family member's home. Last but not least, when talking about strategies concerning parenting, I want to encourage you all, again, in the same wavelength of thinking about communication. Have open communication with your teachers. It's difficult to communicate right at the end of a semester when children have been struggling and grades are really low and you're trying to do everything that you can to help your child get their grade back up. The best way, especially if your school system next school year is going to be looking like it was this year, is to communicate from the beginning. Stay on top of what your child's grades are. Stay on top of whether or not they're turning things in. Sometimes they think they are, but they haven't hit the submit button. Sometimes they have, but the teacher didn't see it. They've submitted their stuff, but the teacher hasn't seen it. And sometimes our children have given up and they just have not been submitting their classwork. This can happen a lot of times with children who have become what I like to call dysregulated. Some children are highly emotional, children and adults actually, are highly emotional anyway. But if you have a highly emotional child, it's important that you understand dysregulation and how you can support that child. Dysregulation occurs when the brain responds to sensory input in a manner that triggers the alarm state. When a child is dysregulated, it's harder for them to listen, comprehend, and to cope. So when thinking about regulation, I say remember the 3 R's. And those 3 R's are regulate, relate, and then reason. When regulating, you want to focus on soothing your child, making them feel calm, safe, and loved. With relate, we validate their feelings with words and tone of voice, saying things such as, I know you're upset right now. This is very hard. Then you focus on connecting with your child. After we've done regulate and relate, we move on to reason. Once your child is calm, now it's time for you to talk about alternatives to their behaviors while reinforcing the limits that you set before. You can reassure them that you love them, but that the behavior that they're exhibiting is not okay. So your child being emotional is not a reason to let go of problematic behavior, but you do have to understand that while they are in a dysregulated state, you cannot really reason with them. They can't hear anything that you're saying. Until a child is regulated, they are unlikely to relate to you. They're unable to feel connected and comfortable. And until that child is related, they are unlikely to have the mental capacity to reason with you. When I think about parenting and families, one term that I like to use a lot is family resource management. When people think about resources, they usually think about money. But when you think about family resource management as a whole, I want you to think about what I call the big 3: money, time, and energy. Look at your bandwidth, and you have to prioritize. Learn to say no. No is absolutely a complete sentence. So your family resource management is not just about how you spend money in your family, how much the snacks cost, how much you're bringing in, input and output, but how much time are you spending with your family while you're in the home? Being in the home with your child sitting next to you and both of you being on the computer is not quality time. So try to have quality time spent with your children and family members. And then your energy, we have to protect our energy. I know that energy can be low even though we may not be going out as much. Sometimes you have the energy to work out, sometimes you don't. But I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about negative and positive energy. If you have a lot of people around you who complain a lot, you want to kind of protect yourself from that. Keep the negativity away because we already have enough going on. And that's not to say don't support your friends, you want to, or family members, you want to be supportive, but too much negativity coming in to your space can negatively affect you, and it can negatively affect your children and anyone else in the household with you. When we are managing that stress, Some things that you can think about doing are seeing a therapist virtually. Today, it is easier than ever to see a therapist. You don't have to drive through Atlanta traffic. You don't have to move everyone around. You just have to have a somewhat stable internet connection. Your therapists are also at home. So they've tried to make themselves a pretty decent office space. And we found that virtual therapy can be just as helpful, if not more helpful, than seeing someone in an office. Consider doing some of those virtual meetups. Take a ride sometimes. You might not be able to go into certain buildings without a mask on, but you can ride in your car without a mask on and just enjoy the scenery. And then read. I love to read. I know that some people don't like to read. I know that some people have some issues reading, but you can also have books read to you on Kindle and on other apps. So you can read self-help books, or you can read books that are fiction, so that you can just escape what's happening around you. Journal. A lot of people are a little afraid of journaling because they're afraid that someone's going to read their journal, but you can keep your journal in a safe place, or you could tear the page out, tear it up, and get rid of it each time. But journaling is a tried and true way of stress management, getting some of those thoughts out of your mind. And if you're not getting them out of your mind and talking to people, get them out on a piece of paper. I promise it can help you. Mindfulness. That's just being aware of what's happening around you. For some people, it's meditation. For some people, it's eating their food a little more slowly so that they can pay attention to the taste and not eat like they're starving. We also want to exercise. Now, you may not be the one to run 3 miles every day, but maybe you want to work up to it. At a minimum, maybe you can walk. Excuse me. Maybe flexibility is something you want to work on. You may want to try yoga or Pilates. The thing about 2021 is you can try all of these things via YouTube, other exercise apps. Someone can let you borrow a DVD. Your streaming services, they have so many different types of exercises that you can try. So if you have been if exercise makes you feel yucky, you don't like it, try something else. I'm sure there is something out there that can work for you. And then stay connected, but don't overdo it. I have to admit that for me, a lot of these virtual meetups have made me kind of not, it's like I'm seeing more people today than I saw back in 2018. So it's good to connect with people, but if you start to feel like it's a chore, it's okay to back up a little bit. I won't say isolate, because isolation is not healthy, but take some time to yourself. You can go on vacation by yourself. You can go get a massage. You can just disconnect a little bit. Just do all these things in a safe and healthy way. When it comes to being around our children and working with our children and working with our colleagues and everyone else, another way to keep from being negative is to change our mindset. And part of changing your mindset and confronting and adjusting negative thinking is simply adjusting your words, because your words have power. Instead of saying something like, I'm ready for life to go back to normal, you can say, I have a new appreciation for the simple things in life. You can say, I'm tired of social distancing, or you can say, I'm going to use my resources to connect with my loved ones in a new way. Just change your words, change your mindset, and change your lifestyle. And then when you are working from home, remember that your children may be working from home also. Even if they're not, they may be in your space. So strategies to help with that are to set yourself a schedule. Please, please, please do not work from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or even worse, 8 a.m. to 10 or 11 p.m. Set yourself a schedule. Be punctual as much as possible. We know that sometimes the internet goes out and you were supposed to be there at 9, but you made it at 9:05. Set boundaries. Don't let people put more work on your plate when you're already trying to finish the work that you're doing. Again, this is not, absolutely not, a productivity competition. When we talk to our children, sometimes it can be difficult for us to remember that they are, although they are children and we do have power over them, that they are still little people with little feelings. And so when we communicate with our children and there's a conflict, we need to use some strategies for conflict resolution. We need to let them know that we care about them and that we respect them to some extent, the same way we would let our colleagues know that we respect them. When we're talking conflict and we're having disagreements, conflict is about 10% of that, and opinion is 90% of it. I'm sorry, 10% opinion and 90% tone. So maybe try to pull back a little bit on your tone when you're talking to your children. You can tell them what you want to say without screaming, because when you scream, they may become dysregulated. Chronic exposure to stress affects our immune system, and it can also affect our attitudes. So if your children and your family members are walking around with attitudes, I know I have a teenager and I have a preteen girl, both girls in my home. And they can have attitudes sometimes, but you have to stop and remember that they have been exposed to chronic stress during this time. And their prefrontal cortexes, which is the part of their brain that helps them make decisions, are not fully developed, but mine is. So it's up to you. It's up to you to be the one to adjust and to help everyone else calm down. And then also keep in mind that text communication can be easily misinterpreted. So if you find yourself sending text messages and it sounds like someone has an attitude on the other side, don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call. Call so that you can hear what the message is actually supposed to be. Another thing to keep in mind with our children is all of this social media. Social media was already a bit of an issue before the pandemic started because of access to information and because of comparison to other people. Types of social media include things like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. A lot of this social media can be dangerous. So some of the risks include having access to incorrect information, seeing things that you might not be ready for your children to see. There's also the inability to disconnect. A lot of people are becoming addicted to the internet, and then lost productivity. Maybe your child is supposed to be in class or finishing a project, and instead they're in a whole other window just scrolling through social media or playing games. So that's that loss of productivity. Comparing themselves to each other and being exposed to trauma are the number one reasons that you may want to consider monitoring your children's social media use. That doesn't mean that you have to be all over their shoulder, but there are some things that you can put in place to make sure that they don't have access to certain information on the internet. Maybe make sure that you can log into all of their social media accounts, not so you can just check every day and every minute and every second, but so that it helps for them to know that you have access, and it'll make them check themselves before they post something that they should not post or they put themselves in dangerous situations. Lastly, I just want to say, be aware of changes in you and in your children. And the top 3 changes that I want you to be aware of are increased irritability, changes in sleep, and changes in appetite. And when I say changes in sleep, I mean, is there too much sleep or is there too little sleep? Both of these indicate something. Is there an increase in appetite, which for a lot of us, I mean, there's been an increase in appetite being home so much, or is there a decrease in appetite? So with all these things in mind, I hope that you all can be in situations where you are able to stop and pause and help not just your children, but help yourselves. And we are almost at the end of this. But even with that, there come other challenges, like, do we wear a mask? Do we not wear a mask? In the end, hopefully, I know not everyone made it through okay, but for those who did, We just have to understand and recognize that we have been blessed to make it through this together. And so we want to make sure that we keep our relationships intact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dickerson. Wow, that was such wonderful and helpful information. Again, if you're listening and you're hearing something that resonates with you, put it in the chat. We invite you to make comments. We invite you to like it, to love, and also to share the conversation so that others can join in as well. Our second panelist is Reverend Dr. Larti, who will provide a brief talk on the promoting Black mental health within the Black community and focusing on the pandemic's impact on community trauma, violence, and mental health. Dr. Larti.
Hello and good morning, and thanks so much for the invitation. Thanks, Reverend Dr. Hale. Thanks, Reverend Erica Geralds. And I'm so honored to be a part of this conversation and salute my co-panelists. Much of what we are dealing with has been compounded by the ongoing challenges of racial injustice, racial violence that has been ongoing and which some have described as COVID-19. And so as communities, we have not only been traumatized by the coronavirus COVID-19, but we have actually been engaged and found ourselves almost in a situation of direct assault. And it's sometimes felt like as if our skins have been a death sentence. Now, the coronavirus itself exposed the health disparities and how very often people of color and communities of color are very much at the lower end of treatment and health resources. And so what we are having to deal with in terms of our mental health in particular, I want to suggest is the need to promote, the need to be active in promoting our mental health. And so the first thing that I want to say on the next slide is be proactive. Deuteronomy 30:19 says, choose life. Choose life that you and your offspring may live. The Israelites were presented with death and life, a cursing and a blessing, and they're encouraged to choose life, to choose health. We have the means and we have the ability to promote, to be proactive in seeking our mental health. Next, I want to draw attention to, we often talk about mental illness because we see examples of that in our families, in our communities, and sometimes tragically, the response of the established institutions have been to exterminate rather than to deal with the issues of mental health. And so what do we mean? What is mental health? And World Health Organization, I think, has provided us with a helpful way of thinking about, a helpful way of recognizing what mental health is in this definition, which we see, where mental health is a state of well-being well-being. So it is being well, but it's a state of well-being in which each individual is able to realize their own abilities. So it's about individual realization of the abilities that we have. So in promoting health, especially mental health, what we are called upon to do is to see mental health as that state of well-being in which we are able to realize our abilities, and then to cope with the normal stresses of life. Now we are having to cope with rather unusual, and over the past 15 months, we've been called upon to cope with rather unusual, but this has been the experience of the whole world. It's been a global challenge. So in a sense, these can also be spoken of as normal stresses of life. Our ability to cope with these stresses is directly related to our mental health. And then thirdly, that state of well-being in which we can work productively and fruitfully. And we have had, as Dr. Asia Dickerson was just saying, we have had to transform the ways in which we work so that we can work productively and fruitfully from home in many cases and do other kinds of productive service. The fourth dimension of mental health in this definition is our ability to make a contribution to our community. And that has to mean that we are able to participate in making significant contributions to the well-being of others within our social networks. And so this is what we are thinking about when we talk about promoting mental health. There's an individual dimension. There's a dimension of coping with things that are external stresses of life that affect us individually as well as socially. And then our productivity and also our ability to contribute to our community. And so what we are seeking is to choose this state of well-being in all that we do. Now, on our next slide, I have provided for us the mixed feelings, and each of these have been reported by many of us in these times. So this is, if you like, an inventory of some of the feelings, and you will recognize just how mixed they are. There's anxiety, there's uncertainty, there's sorrow. There's also fear, there's anger, there's rage, there's hatred. But then there's also depression and sadness, feelings of rejection, feelings of hostility. For some, it means insomnia, it means lack of inability to sleep. For others, it's meant sleeping too much. Others are experiencing the kind of lethargy where you feel you have no energy whatsoever. And then abandonment, feelings of being isolated and left on your own, feelings of indifference, grief. Grief is a huge one. Helplessness, guilt, but also relief in certain situations in the face of some of the things that have happened. Despair, hopelessness, feeling justified as well as feeling disappointed. And so these feelings and many more we are having to cope with and having to deal effectively with in the quest for and in the promotion of our well-being. On the next slide, we recognize, and Monica Williams, who is a clinical psychologist and director of the Center for Mental Health Disparities at the University of Louisville makes these important realizations about the graphic videos that we have been viewing, we all of us, and this video of the murder of George Floyd, which was portrayed across the whole world, and again we watched this, and more recently watched it again during the trial. These graphic videos, combined with lived experiences of racism, can create severe psychological problems that are reminiscent of post-traumatic stress disorder. As she goes on, it is upsetting and stressful for people of color to see these events unfolding, and then to have to watch them again and again and again. It can lead to depression. It can lead to substance use disorders, and in some cases, even psychosis. Very often, it can contribute to health problems that are already prevalent among African Americans, such as high blood pressure. So in a sense, these socially traumatic situations that we are in, all of them actually increase our instability and our mental health instability. We are traumatized, and we even can experience ourselves as being terrorized. Now, we have not, many of us, recently taken flights, but we are been on airplanes, but we have increased our participation now as the virus, the spread of the virus has been largely and more increasingly dealt with. We are grateful for the vaccines that are helping us to overcome this. But one of the things that happens when we travel is we have these in-flight announcements. Should cabin pressure increase, oxygen masks will appear from above. I love that analogy and that image. From above will appear these oxygen masks, and we are encouraged to make sure that we put our oxygen masks on and breathe normally before we help anyone else, even the most vulnerable, our children. This is a picture of self-care. Take care of yourself before you attempt to take care of any others. Self-care is absolutely crucial. And we have to provide care for ourselves individually as well as within our communities. And so on the next slide, I have Audrey Lorde making a quotation from Sister Lorde, in which he says, caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. It's not selfishness, it's self-preservation, which he calls an act of political warfare, an act of taking care of community when one takes care of one's self. Self-care is crucial. It's absolutely very, very necessary if we are going to be of any value or any use to anyone around us. And so I want to suggest that we can proactively promote our own and our community's mental health if we activate and persist in very ordinary, everyday activities, very, very ordinary, everyday activities, if we intensify these. And so I am choosing 4 creative 4-letter words to live by. I am encouraging us to talk, to walk, to play, and to pray. Well, let's think about talking first. Next slide. You know, in these times in particular, let it be that no one, don't ever suffer in silence. Don't ever talk about your experiences. Regularly consult a therapist for spiritually integrated psychotherapy. As Dr. Asha was just reminding us, the opportunities exist for us to talk. I love it that we are having this conversation. Would that it will continue to be a regular feature of our lives, that we talk about our mental health and we express clearly where we are experiencing those mixed feelings, experiencing those traumatized and even terrorized experiences within our groups. So create opportunities for group therapy. And I know that in Ray of Hope, you are doing just that. Share with and listen to people who have diagnoses of mental illness, as well as those who do not. But let's share. And let's have as many of these conversations, as many of these mental health fairs, if you like, not only health fairs, but mental health fairs in our churches. Let's talk, let's ventilate our feelings and our experiences. Secondly, next slide, let's walk. Let's walk. But by walk, I'm really meaning let's encourage physical therapy. 1 Timothy 4:8 as an appeal for training in godliness. And within that appeal, we find Paul saying bodily training is of some value. In other words, the scriptures are recognizing that exercise, bodily training, has some value. It's like occupational therapy. So exercise. Regularly walk, regularly run, regularly cycle. Or form walking clubs and running or cycling clubs. Go to the gym or sports facility, or else just simply engage in gardening. And do all of those things that get us out and get us into activity. These will all facilitate our mental health individually as well as within our communities. Next slide. The third, I am proposing again the scripture in Proverbs 17:22 is encouraging, where it says, "A merry heart is good medicine," and we have that that saying, "Laughter is the best medicine," which is based on this and other realizations. But the opportunity to play, I want to suggest, is actually beneficial for our mental health. Music, you all remember in Saul's experience, how Saul would call for David and how David would exercise what I call harp therapy. He would play the harp, and all the despondency and all the melancholic feelings that Saul had, the evil spirits that Saul had, would all be removed. Dance is a wonderful way of accomplishing both bodily exercise and also fun, creative and expressive arts like art and painting and poetry, spoken word, drama. These are all ways by which we can ventilate our experiences and promote our mental health. And so I have on this slide this National Coalition of Creative Arts Therapies Associations and the resources on art therapy that are directly related to COVID-19 and the resources that are related to dance and movement therapy, drama therapy, music therapy. Let's take these and make use of them. They are all ways in which we can promote our well-being. And then the last slide has a reference to prayer. And in a sense, what this is calling us to is to put our spiritual exercises into full operation. And I have suggested that if you don't already have these particular spiritual practices that have been particularly found to be related to our mental and our spiritual well-being, meditation and contemplative prayer, then that you add those: mindfulness, meditation, the practice in which an individual uses various techniques to focus and also to train our attention and our awareness to achieve clear and emotionally calm and stable states. Our contemplative prayer, in which we focus on, or we look at, or we gaze at the divine and experience the calmness and the peace that passes human understanding. That is the result of these engagements with the divine. So let's walk, and let's talk, and let's play, and let's pray. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Larti, again for providing such great and helpful information. Thank you all for the comments in the section that you are making in the comment section. Don't forget, if you are just joining us, let us know where you're joining from. We invite you to like, to love, and to share the conversation so that others can join in. Now we will have our third panelist, Reverend Lynn Peabody Smith. She's going to provide a brief talk on the pandemic's impact on grief, spirituality, and mental health. Dr. Lynn.
Good morning, beloved. I'm so excited to be with you all, especially this Ray of Hope family. I have really enjoyed this group as we've been preparing. And so I thank you, Reverend Geralds, for thinking of me. And especially Dr. Cynthia Hale, you're like an icon. And so to even be in your presence is such a blessing. So let's get started. Next slide. We have our slide up. There we go. Thank you so much. So I like to say that we have kind of all been in the same storm of COVID, but we've been in different boats, meaning we've all had kind of different experiences. Some people have done really, really well, and some it's been quite a challenge, right? And so there's all of these different emotions. The main emotion, though, that I think we all share as a community is actually going to be the one regarding grief, right? So let's talk about grief a little bit. Next slide. We say that grief is the price that we pay for love, meaning if we love something and there's a chance that we're going to lose it at any given time, then we're going to have some grief. Now, during COVID-19, we had the death of loved ones, not only losing loved ones to COVID or to other means, but not being able to come together and at funerals and things like that. We've been separated from our family, from our friends, so we grieve that. Many of us have suffered job loss or even the possibility of loss. And so there's something to grieve in that. The loss of routine. Routine and structure kind of keeps us safe. It makes us feel organized. And so when that is taken away, we grieve that space. Loss of milestones. It is really interesting to see the number of late teens and young adults who have been suffering because they were looking forward to the prom or to graduation or their first day at college. And so they weren't able to have those milestones. And so they have grieved that as well. And then we look also at anybody. If you were going to have your 50th birthday party or you were going to have a wedding during COVID, that was going to look really different. And so there was a lot of grief around that as well. Loss of community, meaning we're used to being in worship together or being able to go outside and see people. And so not having that has been something to grieve. And then the loss of relationships. As a counselor, as a therapist, my number of sessions with couples has increased significantly. One, because now we're kind of there with that person almost all day, every day, and we're noticing some things that maybe we didn't notice before. Or because friendships that are where people are used to being together all the time, they just haven't been able to, and some of those friendships have fallen apart. And then there is the sense of safety, the loss of sense of safety. I remember taking my youngest daughter, who's 13, and she is so courageous. Like, she's brave. She has way more self-esteem than I ever did at her age. But after the lockdown or the shelter in place, I took her out to the supermarket and she became so anxious, and she's never anxious. But seeing people in masks or having to walk this way and that way, it increases that loss of the sense of safety. And then you add on to that everything that we talked about earlier about all of the injustice in the world. And so there's been a huge loss of safety. Next slide. So these are, there's different models of grief, but this is one of the most common by Kubler-Ross. And it starts with denial. There's anger. There is depression. There's bargaining, and there's acceptance. And we don't go through these stages in that order. Sometimes they're just kind of all over the place. And I like to tell people that there is no time limit on grief. And our tears are not a sign of our weakness. Our tears are a form of worship. And so we grieve as long as we need to grieve, right? Now, if it goes past a certain amount of years, we're looking at complicated grief. But there is also this sense of sadness, right? And so I want to tell you a little bit about what these stages look like in a pandemic, right? So the stage of denial might be, I'm not worried about it. It's not going to get that bad. And then nothing else, it won't affect me. And then anger might look like, I am so mad, I cannot go to the movies or to the mall. Bargaining may look like, okay, so if I stay at home for 2 weeks and wear a mask the next 2 weeks, this is going to be over, right? And then sadness looks like, I feel like this is never going to be over. And then acceptance, and acceptance doesn't mean that you accept it and you're okay with it. It means that you recognize that it is what it is. And we may have to find a new normal. We're never going to go back to the way it used to be. I think about 9/11 and the tragedy of 9/11 and before 9/11 and after 9/11. We had so many changes, especially specifically at the airports, right? So it was a new normal. And so we're probably going to see that same kind of thing. Next slide. So I'm going to go real quick through the mental health part because we've talked, you've had some great experts talk about it so far, but I wanted to show you the things that I am seeing in my practice. And this is probably kind of nationwide as well. We're seeing a lot of stress and PTSD, right? So even when we're on the other side of the COVID pandemic, we're going to still be experiencing some stress from it. But there is stress on how to do this, right? I would say nobody's ever been in a pandemic before. Most of us have not. So how do we help these kids with school, make sure they eat, make sure they're online, but also have to do my work? Or how am I going to live if that stimulus check doesn't come soon, or whatever? So there's a lot of stress. And then there's depression. It's just being sad. Anxiety, like we talked about. And then there's an increase in alcohol and substance abuse. Part of this is because if you're working from home and you have wine or alcohol, it's kind of easy access. So you might be indulging more. And some are just using it as a tool to kind of numb all the stress and the pain that they're experiencing. And then we've seen increase in suicide attempts, especially in our young people. Those that have been kind of groomed, like you go to high school, you go to college, you come out and you're going to get a job and get a house and, marry with 2.4 kids. A lot of that's not happening. A lot of our young people have worked really hard and there aren't jobs. So they're seeing a lot of depression and that hopelessness. And so one of the things that we can do is somehow give people some hope. Next slide. So just some individual responses. We've talked about some of them already, but some that might be a little bit not as noticeable would be we talked about sleep changes, lack of motivation, meaning if you like to knit, but now you just don't feel motivated to do it, that can be a concern. We talked about poor appetite and overeating. I'm with Dr. Asha. I think I've gained the 19 pounds in COVID-19 because it's just been so easy to eat all day, right? But if it's excessive or you just don't feel like eating, or I give the example, if you're leaving work and you have a meal in the, ready to cook at home, but you are so stressed out, you just got to get a McFlurry and some fries, that's kind of a clue that we might be having a negative response. Frequent headaches or pains, difficulty controlling temper or emotions. I compare it to a soda can, right? If you keep shaking it, and then it goes, phew. So we're holding all these emotions in, and then something not so serious like somebody spills some milk happens and we just explode, right? Reduced threshold is kind of the same thing. If we had chronic conditions like migraines or blood pressure, those are probably getting worse. And then we're kind of nervous about the future. The unknown is scary and we don't know what's there. And so that causes some anxiety as well. Now, on a more positive note, I have seen, and many of my colleagues have seen, an increase in those seeking out mental health services. And I know it's because there is a need, but I also believe because of access. Going virtual allows a client to feel more comfortable because they're in their own space, or they don't have to worry about traffic or a babysitter. And so it's easier access. And many people who have never tried counseling, once they try it, they love it. And so we've seen an increase in services. Most of my colleagues have very full client loads right now, which is sad that so many of us are going through so much, but it's kind of great that we're getting past that stigma and looking for services. Next slide. So as a community, just a couple of things. One thing the pandemic has done, it has reminded us that we are a global community. Now, I believe that God made us to be in community. And sometimes we will separate ourselves or become individualistic, but this is a reminder that we are together as a community. What one person does impacts another, right? Emotions are contagious. Like the example what I gave with my daughter, you can be as carefree, but if you go into a world that's anxious or feeling anxious, we can pick up on that. And then the lack of community has been really difficult. In therapy, I believe it's the relationship that heals, and not having relationships are difficult. And lastly, it requires a unified response. The way that we get through the pandemic is to work together as a community. So next slide. Spiritually, it has it's been different, right? And not having in-person worship, especially when it first started, not really knowing what we were going to do and how we were going to handle that, especially if we didn't have the resources, or our seasoned saints may not have kind of known what to do. We had to take time to be able to help them to get on. And then, you know, IT, right? Sometimes there's going to be some unavoidable issues. The lack of connection, again, I believe we're made for community. Community is where we find our strength, where we realize that we're not alone, where we get our encouragement. And so not having that with our church family has been really difficult. I am a hugger. I was a hugger before COVID. I got my vaccine so that I can hug again one day, I'm hoping, right? And there's just something about that part of when we come together in worship that is just so different. And then you have all these questions. Why do bad things happen? Why is this happening? What's going on? And there's a bunch of different theological approaches, right? Mine is we just don't know. But when we are spiritually connected, right? We can be physically distant, but spiritually connected. When we are spiritually connected, we have each other and we have our faith, knowing that God is already there. And then we have a lot, especially millennials, who have been revisiting faith, right? Where they, you know, they don't want to come to worship and have to sit there or drive or whatever, but now they can just click on at their convenience. So if somebody is working Sunday morning, they can catch it on Monday morning. So in general in life, we've been seeing a decrease in spirituality, so to speak, or being members of churches. But over the last year, we've seen many people come back. And so that's been one of the benefits of online worship, is that we're beginning to reach people, especially our young people, that we haven't been able to reach before. So next slide. I am going to give you my little bit of advice. You've heard some great advice already, but you have to first name it, right? We can't hide our feelings or what we are expressing. If we don't name it, then we can't deal with it. You know, there's a story where Jesus comes and it's the man that has all the demons, and he says, "What is your name?" Like, Jesus doesn't really have to ask that because he's Jesus and he knows. I believe part of why he asked is because we had to name it. And then once we name it, we can deal with it. In that story, it was named and Jesus cast that out, right? Giving grace. I think Dr. Aisha mentioned this. We got to give each other some grace. We got to give ourselves some grace. Definitely have to give our teachers some grace. I don't know how a teacher is doing it in this pandemic, but also giving our children some grace. My child has been an A-B student since she could talk, and she did not do well with virtual learning. And I was stressing it. And her doctor said to me, give her some grace. It's 1 year. It's going to be okay. Positive social connections, like was mentioned, social media. If you're following somebody who's negative, you can unfollow them. They probably won't even notice, right? But you got to monitor your social media. Find sites like Ray of Hope to be able to follow that's going to give you some hope, right? And don't follow the things that don't make you feel good. And also with the news, you have to, I get up in the morning, I look at the news, I look at it at night. But too much of it is going to have an impact, a negative impact. Dr. Lately always talked about moving. I love that. Even if you just get up and start dancing in your office or in your kitchen, whatever you have to do, go outside, breathe in and breathe out. It does make a difference. And let go of what you can't control, right? Ask yourself, can I control this? And oftentimes we are trying to control everything. And control is rooted out of fear. And when we are trying to control, we're basically saying we don't trust God to work this out. There are some things we simply cannot control. And if we can't control it, if it's out of our hands, we got to get it out of our mind, okay? And then I've been hearing about this 6th step of grief, where we find meaning in all of this. Some people have found new vocations. I've learned that I am a gardener and I'm a a tomboy, right? I was a tomboy growing up, and now I'm like got all this pretty flowers and gardens all over the place. I just used to do sports, and now I do a lot more. Or you just needed some rest. But I don't always believe that, God makes bad things happen, but I know that God can take some bad thing and take that pain and turn it into purpose. And so what can I gain from all of this? Because God does not waste anything. And then we have to nourish our connection with God, whatever that looks like or feels like for you. I don't meditate very well because my mind goes all over the place. And even though I can't sing and I have no rhythm, I love to speak to God or hear God through just music or just reading. And then nourish your connection with God's people. Again, being with people who feel good, make you feel good, who you can be sad with, who can give you some hope. And then, like we talked about, you got to take care of you. You have to, right? I always tell my clients when they say, you know what, I just want to run away. I say, go ahead, go run away. Just make sure you come back, right? Take a break, whether it's a long 15-minute shower or you're going for that long ride. But you got to take care of you. We all, oftentimes think that we can do it all by ourselves. And we probably can, but it probably won't end up well, right? You've heard it before. We can't pour from an empty cup. So if I could just end with my final thought. Many have been in really some dark places and have wondered, where is God in all of this? And so I want to share with you a story about a little boy who was caught in a fire. And the house was on fire and he had to go up the stairs and onto the roof in order to survive. And then the smoke was everywhere. And he heard the voice of his father telling him to jump. And the boy was scared. And he said, I can't jump. He said, I can't see you. And his father said, but I can see you. So, beloved, I just want to leave you with this reminder that even if we don't see God in the way that we're used to, God is right there. God is with you. God is with you working it out. And at the same time, God is ahead of you working that out. God will never leave us nor forsake us. And that alone, knowing that God is with us, no matter what it may seem or what we can or cannot see, knowing that God is with us is hope and love in itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend J. Lynn, for that wonderful information, and to all of our wonderful expert panelists for providing such great information on mental health. We hope that this information has been helpful to you, your faith community, and families. We thank you again for joining Mental Health Conversations, where we're highlighting the pandemic. But now we want you to join in the conversation. We want to hear from you. We welcome any questions that you may have for our panelists on mental health, mental illness, mental wellness. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat. The panelists will now take a few minutes to answer your questions. We will try our best to get to all of them, but if we don't, we will have access to come back and provide information in the comment section. So again, if you have any questions in the comment section, we invite you to provide those questions now to our expert panelists. Again, thank you for joining in the conversation. And while you are putting those questions in the chat, we will begin with a couple of preliminary questions. I see that we do have one question from the chat, and this will go to all of our panelists. And the first question is, what are some resources for parents that have challenges financially and access to technology to get therapy? Any of you may answer the question that has been provided.
Well, I think
I can start by saying that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, doctor.
Go ahead.
I
I was just going to say that the number one resource is the school.
Yeah.
The school system, even when it's the summertime, the school system, if you ask, will provide you with technology that they have available. In addition, a lot of the internet companies like Xfinity, if you fill out paperwork, they will give you access to the internet, or they can give you a mobile hotspot to assist with the technology issues. Now, when it comes to getting the actual therapy, the first place that you want to check is your insurance, including Medicaid. And then there are foundations such as Taraji P. Henson has a foundation. You can go there and get access to a few free counseling sessions sometimes. I believe it's tailored to different populations each month, but the access, the information is there.
Thank you for that information, Dr. Reverend J. Lynn. Do you have additional information you want to add?
Well, I was just going to say that many of us as therapists offer sliding scale, and sometimes you just have to ask, do you have a sliding scale spot available? There are many, like I just said, there's foundations that offer assistance, financial assistance with counseling. We have My Sacred Spaces, which is the one that I founded, and what we do is we provide other therapists with a stipend to see that client for at least 5 or 6 sessions. Now, if there's a cell phone, you can I think it's teenlineonline.org, where kids can text other teenagers that are trained to kind of help with some everyday stuff. And then need number 2 text is another alternative, and those are for young people to be able to talk to licensed professionals. So there are some resources out there, especially now, because I think we are beginning to realize how important mental health access is.
Thank you for that information. We have another question. Are individuals with no history of mental health conditions at risk for mental distress during the pandemic?
Well, let me begin by saying every one of us is at risk. There is nobody that is not at risk. The statistic at the moment is 1 in 5. Used to be 1 in 4, 1 in 5. In this country, will suffer some kind of mental health challenge at some point. So I think that it's important for every one of us to be aware and to be proactive, because any one of us can suffer some of the effects, especially in these times, with all of the things that we've been describing, especially the loss of social interaction, physical interaction. That's a major thing that has meant that we're all of us at risk, is what I would say.
That being proactive piece is the most important. Keep in mind that there doesn't have to be anything wrong for you to go to counseling. Right. So, I mean, keep in mind also that a lot of your, there are employee assistance programs that people have available that they aren't always using. But I have people who come see me once a year like, hey, I got my 7 sessions with my EAP. I just want to talk 7 times so that I don't get to the point where I need to come and see you regularly for, a year or 2.
Thank you for that information. What can we do as a faith community or families? What can we do to help stop the stigma surrounding mental health?
Preach it from the pulpit, kind of what we're doing right now, being able to bring the discussion to the forefront. Studies have shown the first person we go to when there's a problem is our pastor. Right. So knowing that they either, like the Ray of Hope, have counseling resources available, or what I call the ministry of introduction, being able to introduce them to somebody that can help. People who have benefited from therapy, being able just to share their stories. Anytime, especially when we have a African-American celebrity come out about, I went to therapy, we see an increase. So that's important. Churches can host groups like Alcoholics Anonymous or Celebrate Recovery, just kind of hosting them, giving them a place to be. And then, watching our language. And this is not just for churches, this is for everybody. So saying things like the weather is bipolar, that's not okay. Because for someone who has bipolar, that's not going to feel good. And we're just going to be adding to that stigma. So that's what I say. My number one is just like we're doing now. We got a preacher from the pulpit.
We have another question. What are some ways to encourage older family members to disconnect from exercise? To disconnect from excessive news watching and negative social media when they feel that they are staying plugged in, keeping them informed and safe. This is excessive information. What can we do to help family members disconnect?
One of the main things that you can do is to make sure that you are allowing them to connect to you. Now, I know there are a lot of grandparents who sit at home and they don't have as much connection with their children or their grandchildren anymore, so they have nothing to do but watch the news all day. I remember my grandfather watching the Weather Channel all day, but he would turn it off when someone was coming over to see him or when they would call him on the phone. Feeling that they have something else to do can be helpful. Get your older family members out of the house. And it's okay to also talk. Don't be afraid to talk to them about limiting that media exposure. But ultimately, it's a lack of other things to do a lot of times.
Yeah, and I think that's very important, the provision of alternatives for that. I use a Sabbath principle in relation to watching news. I choose, I make a deliberate choice not to watch media 1 in 7 times, so if I take a day to rest, I take a day, the equivalent of a day, not to watch news and all of this kind of thing. But in place of that, I talk to the kids and the grandkids, or I talk to colleagues and friends. So I think any and every way in which we can provide alternatives and we can encourage people to take breaks, I think is very helpful.
Thank you all for that information. Reverend J. Lynn, I know you talked a little bit about grief. And even though we are grateful for the vaccine, we know that there is no vaccine for the overwhelming amount of grief and loss that we've experienced during the pandemic. And it has been stated that the COVID-19 pandemic will be outlasted by the grief pandemic. So what are ways that we can prepare for long-term effects of grief?
I think there are two things. One, a lot of the grief that we're experiencing is kind of secondary grief in terms of COVID has taken so much, and because of that, there's this ripple effect. So if it's kind of the example, if you have that that mother or that grandmother, that's the person that keeps the family together and keeps those traditions going. And now that we lost them, that's not happening. And so now we have this secondary loss. And so there's two things, I think. One, let's look at what we can control, right? We can control getting the family back together, or at least attempting to. And the things that we can't control, we just have to really allow ourselves to be sad. Grief is like a wave. It's going to come in waves. And if you try to stand in front of a wave, it's going to knock you in your face. And if you turn your back and try to act like it's not there, it's going to knock you down. So sometimes you just got to ride the wave. You have to allow yourself to just be sad. People often say to me they don't like to cry. I say, just take 10 minutes a day and just go ahead and cry and just feel what you're feeling. Like, I'm really big that tears are a form of worship. We only cry about what is important to us or what we have loved. So just allowing ourselves to express those feelings. And that's going to help us to kind of ride that wave out a little bit.
Thank you for that information. Tears are a form of worship. Wow. I know we are having this conversation on today, and you're in the simplest form, because the purpose is to, break the stigma, silence the shame, get us to talk about mental health more openly. In the simplest way for our audience to hear, why is mental health important? Dr. Larti, you want to answer that? Okay.
Well, I'll start by saying your mental health connects to everything else. When you are stressed, it bothers many different physical systems. You can have bleeding ulcers, our blood pressure rises, we start to eat more, which then can bring our health down. So keeping your mental health under control keeps your physical health under control. It keeps you from overspending a lot of times, so you're keeping your finances under control. Your mental health is the foundation for all of these other systems.
Absolutely, and it's kind of like central, isn't it? In terms of the fact that it sort of radiates our lives, radiate from that inner core, and when that is dysfunctional or disturbed, it affects all the other dimensions of our lives.
Mental health is health, right? It affects every part of our lives. Mm-hmm. Thank you guys for that information. You all mentioned earlier, as you were speaking, that we are in times of uncertainty. How do you build resiliency in the face of uncertainty?
So I think that the this whole thing about being proactive, I think is really the way to build resiliency. I can't even say the word. It's kind of like we have to take. We have to choose, and I love that verse that I offered from Deuteronomy. Choose life. It's your choice. You have to choose to take care of yourself. You have to choose to exercise those things that will enable you to overcome. And so I think the main thing is let's be proactive. Let's make those choices that will increase our resiliency or enable us to deal with what are stresses that they are a part of life. And this pandemic has simply highlighted the fact that we are stress is kind of, and we have to adapt to, we have to change to so many different kinds of circumstances. So this is going to go on, even after this wave, so to speak, is over. It's going to go on. So we have to continue to be proactive about our health.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Larti, I love what you said about choosing life in that scripture. I'm going to preach that one day. I'm going to give you all the credit, but I'm going to preach that. But, the other thing is that we are children of God, right? We have this Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who gave us this invitation to come onto him and he would give us rest. And when we talk about this yoke, a yoke is this instrument that kind of keeps things, because one is going to be stronger, one is weaker, and it kind of keeps it a little bit even. And so taking that invitation to let God work this out with us, that we don't have to have all the answers, that this is the time that we really have to really just rely on our faith. And God has given us that invitation as his children to do so.
Awesome. I know that there have also been a lot of changes in regards to persons focusing on their mental health during the pandemic. And again, you may have highlighted some of these as you were giving your brief talks, but what are the positive impacts of the pandemic on our mental health? What are the positive impacts of the pandemic on our mental health?
Well, let me just say a couple of things. My both my sisters who have an active practice, were referring to the access that it has provided. A lot more people are feeling able to, largely because it's on social media. They are finding it easier to access therapy. They want to go and see, and that's I think that's a positive thing. So the in a sense, the pandemic has provided for us the need to explore some of these technologies that may have been we may have looked down upon in the past as avenues for therapy and for the care of ourselves. And I think that's a very positive thing. And the fact that we can access these things in the comfort of our homes. We are in a safe space and a private space, and we don't have to enter into an unfamiliar or a challenging space in order to receive the therapy that we need.
One of the biggest positives, I would say, is the change in work environment. I think a lot of companies realize that because their employees can be more productive from home, it's not necessary to have them in the office every day, all day. And they're happier, when they can just be in the office 3 to 5 hours a day, maybe 3 times a week, and still be home when their kids get there, or still be able to make dinner for their families. People were bogged down with working and having a difficult time adjusting that, having that work-life balance. And companies and agencies are able to see that they can help their workers have work-life balance and also have higher productivity. That's a big positive change.
Mm-hmm. And along those lines, Dr. Dickerson, you are so right. I think it's not only companies, but it's our individual selves. I didn't realize how much I was doing before I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even realize I needed that much rest until I had to take it. And a year later, there are some things that I just won't be going back to because they don't bring me joy or they pull too much from me. So I think you're absolutely right. I'm excited about what companies and organizations are going to do different.
Yeah. I mean, like the ability to be able to have a meeting and then take an afternoon nap and then come back to the meeting, like that is huge.
Yes.
That saved lives.
Yes, we're looking at ways that we can create more rest and restoration, and also the time that we're spending with our families. I know you mentioned also earlier that we were impacted by not being connected. And even though we are still in our virtual spaces, just highlight again, what are ways, even though we have the vaccine, to in the times of social distancing, why is it important for us to stay connected? And what are ways for persons to stay connected?
Oh, I just want to say for me personally, even getting back together with people face to face, because I know that looking at computers and screens can be taxing on the eyes and other systems. We need to, the weather is getting better, and being outside in the sunlight is good for our mental health and our physical health also. I'm not sure I ever want to stop wearing a mask because I have not been sick or even had issues with allergies in over a year. So I mean, back to the question about positive things. I mean, one of the positive things we learned are that masks protect us against more than COVID-19. And also, let's appreciate when the weather is nice that we get out there and take advantage of it.
Yes.
So I have family in Ghana, in West Africa, and in the United Kingdom. and in Europe. And it was really difficult before the pandemic to get us together to talk to each other. Well, since the pandemic, we've regularly, every week, we have an hour when we gather together on Zoom. And we visit with each other, and we do it together. I hope that never goes away. It means that I can visit with family in Ghana without having to go anywhere, and then we can facilitate conversations between those in Britain and those in Germany, and we can do that without having to move far away. So I think that's certainly one of the positive things that needs to continue.
Awesome. As we are starting to come back together, what are some thoughts about how to ease back in and decrease the anxieties that may have formed?
I'm with Dr. Dickerson. I'm gonna keep my mask on.
I love
Keeping our mask
I'm
on.
not sure why I was ever walking around without masks on in the first place.
Right.
Many people are still anxious about coming together, even though we're vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
You gave some helpful tips earlier in regards to dealing with the anxiety. Anything else that you would add to that in regards to, still in this state of anxiousness?
Yes, I would say that you don't have to rush out and do what everyone else is doing. If it will make you feel better to see how other people who are comfortable, how they do, that's fine. There are a lot of people who are vaccinated and they're headed to restaurants and they're headed on vacation. If you have anxiety, give it a couple of months. Sit back and watch how other people progress. And take time, maybe go to a restaurant outside and then see if you want to go to one inside. Or, even if you want to sit back and see how people react to the vaccine a year later, that's fine too. There's no rush for you to get back out there. But in the meantime, please still consider doing virtual therapy, because again, there doesn't have to be anything wrong, but it can help you with some of the anxiety that you may be having.
That's all great information. My last question, is there persons who may be experiencing mental illness, mental distress, and they say, I'll just pray it away. If I pray, it will go away. Can you give some information that encourages persons to get or seek mental health support? And it's okay to have your faith and to seek mental health support?
I'm going to defer to everyone who has Reverend attached to their name. Everybody here but me.
I'm sure Dr. Larti's going to have something super deep. So let me just say, the Bible also says to seek wise counsel. And just like the example I gave before, sometimes we have to name it so that we can cast it out. Jesus didn't cast out the person, just whatever was that challenge was. And just like, we go to get our physicals every year, it doesn't mean that we don't have faith, right? So in the same way, we can go and get our mental checkups. And it doesn't mean that we don't have faith. So I have a shirt that says prayer and therapy.
Thank you, Reverend Jaylene. I think that says it all. I am a great advocate for prayer and Prozac.
Yes.
So yes, you see the thing is, it's we by narrowing it to a spiritual, which is not encompassing of our whole lives, is actually what we are doing in doing that is actually we are minimizing ourselves. You see, spirituality has physical, emotional, mental components. You see, so those who say all you have to do is pray, I want to encourage all the other things as well, the walking, the talking, and the playing, because they are all a part of our wholeness. We cannot be whole if we only emphasize one dimension of what is a whole. I mean, Jesus said, I'm the several times when he preached, he would ask the disciples, how can we feed these people? What can we do to, don't let them simply listen to words.
Yes.
Give them something to eat. So that the divine concern is for our total well-being, our whole well-being as whole persons. God created us body, mind, soul, and spirit. And so we have to take care of all of that. Otherwise, we lose out on certain dimensions of our wholeness.
Thank you all for just the wonderful information and resources that you have provided as we have had this mental health conversation, helping us to be able to navigate through the pandemic. This information has been definitely helpful, and we hope that persons are encouraged to make sure that they have holistic health, focusing on mind, body, spirit, and soul. Thank you again to our expert panelists. We also thank Keys of Hope Counseling Ministry at Ray of Hope Christian Church for hosting this event. We will now hear from Sister Darlene Taylor, who is the Keys of Hope chairperson.
Greetings, everyone. I'd like to give honor to our senior pastor, Reverend Dr. Cynthia L. Hale, to all the reverends, the panelists, the technical support, and all of our viewers. We have an evaluation that has been placed in the chat. I ask that you click on the link, and if you would complete that evaluation now. Takes a few moments. We would greatly appreciate that. And your feedback will help us with future events. Keys of Hope Counseling Ministry offers biblical counseling for Ray of Hope members and also the community, free of charge. Biblical counseling provides practical spiritual help to hurting people. The goal of this ministry is to equip people with the tools and resources to find emotional, spiritual, and mental health to wholeness. Key of Hope Ministries offers individual counseling, couples counseling, family counseling. We also have grief share counseling that consists of about 13 weeks. We meet once a week for 2 hours. We've been virtual for this year and also part of last year. We're able to offer referrals when necessary. Also, we do offer seminars as well as workshops. Biblical counseling is guidance and support provided by a Christian counselor using the Bible as the foundation for direction. Our contact information you can find on our church website, www.rayofhope.org. And I hope everyone has enjoyed the feast. I was thinking smorgasbord at first, and then I said, oh, this has just been such a wonderful feast. I have just enjoyed myself greatly. Thank you, everyone who has put this together, certainly our planning team, but all of our participants. And I turn this part over into the hands of Reverend Kenny Rice, who is over our outreach ministries. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Darlene. I am extremely appreciative. Again, my name is Reverend Kenny Rice, and I am the Minister of Outreach at Ray of Hope. Again, on behalf of our senior pastor, Dr. Cynthia Hale, allow me to extend my sincerest and profoundest gratitude to each of our panelists, Dr. Dickerson, Reverend Smith, and Dr. Emmanuel Larti, for your wealth of knowledge as it pertains to mental health. our moderator, Reverend Erica Geralds, our planning team, Reverend Jabari Butler, Sister Darlene Taylor, Reverend Donna Gunter, and Reverend Claire Henry, and Sister Letice Edgerton for your live support. Mental health is quintessential to our spiritual formation and integral to our overall comprehensive health. As you all know, the Bible teaches us, beloved, above all things, I wish that you would be in good health and that you would prosper even as your soul prospers. So today has been most uplifting and enriching. And again, we are grateful for these experts pouring out of their research, their experience, and their expertise and taking the time to share with us. We encourage you all to connect with our Keys of Hope Counseling Ministry through our Grief Share program, which is a 13-week comprehensive program that helps to meet the needs of people at the point of their need. I now offer this simple benediction as we prepare to depart. God, go ahead of us to guide us, be behind us to protect us, be beside us to walk with us, be over us to watch over us, and most importantly, be within us to give us strength so that we always have equilibrium and equanimity in each and every step of the journey. Thank you all so much for joining. We pray that something has been said or done that was enriching to your spirit and to your mind. God bless you.
God bless you all. Thank you all for joining and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.